Welcome to the Big Success Podcast, cutting-edge conversations on business and personal success, as well as how to level up. Here's your host, #1 business coach in the world, Brad Sugars.
You know, I was 20 years old. I attended the Money and You program. Little did I know, here I am 30-something years later, and the impact that program would have on me. Dame Doria Cordova was the principal behind the Money and You program. Me, Rob Kiyosaki, Tony Robbins, amazing people have gone through this program and built amazing businesses and amazing educators around the planet. DC's perspective on success is just going to give you a whole different realm of how success happens. She's changed the world by being the ripple effect, by being the one behind a lot of people. And I want you to learn her strategies today. Dive on in with me, Dame DC Cordova, right here with you on the Big Success Podcast. So, Doria, tell me, what is your definition of success?
Where success is the impact that you have in the world. Success is when people come up to you and just say, hey, you completely changed my life. And not me, but so much by my programs and the work that I do, because, you know, it's a collaboration. And success is when you begin to really see, you know, your impact on the world. Like with us, it has been transforming educational systems. And success also is when you wake up in the morning and you are excited and you're like, yes, I'm ready to go like I am this morning.
Yeah. So let's go backwards a little ways. Was that always your definition, or did your definition change over your lifetime?
When I was very young, in my 20s, success was, you know, how much money I had, respected was always part of it, because I'm Latina from Chile. So respect and being honorable and being respected by your peers. That was much more driving me in my 20s. And of course, financial, being able to afford anything.
Yeah.
And that actually stayed. I think all of those are part of the mix.
Yeah. And what shifted you mostly to this definition? Was there an event? Was there a change, or was it a gradual shift?
Oh, no, it was an enlightenment experience that I had on in Kauai in 1976. And then shortly thereafter, I met Buckminster Fuller, you know, who was talking about sufficiency in 1977, when, you know, there was no such conversation. And then attending the first business school for entrepreneurs, the work that I inherited. Yeah. So it was a process, but it was relatively quick, within a couple of years.
Yeah. So when you think about success, where in your life did you choose success? Was it as a child? Was it as a young woman? Where did you choose that I'm going to be successful at whatever I do?
It was in my DNA. My mother tells me that she held me and in her arms when I was first born and said, you are going to be successful. And throughout my whole childhood, it was like, look how successful she is. And I actually had to clear that up a little bit, because I wanted to be the most beautiful. And Mama used to say, she may not be the most beautiful little girl in the neighborhood, but she's certainly the most intelligent. And it was, in my family, failure is not an option in my family. So I had to kind of allow that later in my life.
Yeah. You know, when you think about where success comes from in life, and you've obviously educated a lot of people in that way, what is, like today, what's your thoughts on how success happens, or your formula or your methodology for people to be successful?
Failure. You know, the more that you make mistakes, you know, as we know, Buckminster Fuller taught us, you know, that in life, you know, it's like the biggest mistakes that humans make, he used to say, was to make yourself wrong or to make others wrong for making mistakes. So mistakes is part of the mix. And the faster, the more that we accept failure and mistakes, the better that you're going to get at. It's just part of the mix. And that is probably one of the toughest things to do.
Well, how do you emotionally, because you've taught this again, but how do people emotionally get to learn from a mistake rather than believe they are the mistake or fall into the mistake type thing. What's that shift?
Well, first you have to allow. You have to allow for those feelings to happen. When we first make that mistake and we beat ourselves up, go ahead and do it for just a little bit. You know, the more that you work on self mastery, the shorter and shorter that it will get. So in the old days, you would do it for years and months and then weeks and then days. And now you maybe do it for an hour or a few minutes.
Right.
Because once you really get in, okay, this is part of the game, this is part of it, but you have to allow for that to come in. Otherwise, you become what we call emotionally constipated because those feelings are ready to come out because you didn't allow it. So now you allow for that to occur. And then, of course, you do that reset and you kind of like reformat it and you just kind of go, okay, this is going to, I love what Mark Victor Hansen's, you know, another great Money and Your Graduate. He says, this is going to make a great book someday. You know, I love that quote of his because when you're in the middle of a learning experience, you go, this is going to be a great book someday. Or what a great story to tell with, because successful people love to tell stories about when they failed. It's kind of like your medals, you know, that you have. Truly successful people have no shame and understand that failure is part of it. And so you begin to reframe it and you do it at the speed of grace as much as you can. But the more that you work on yourself, the more coaching that you have, the more work that you do on yourself, the more that it will become acceptable. And that that's probably the greatest tip that I can give to anyone, to
Yeah.
just allow yourself and then learn from it and make it part of your story.
You mentioned something there, speed of grace. Tell me more about that because I've never heard that term before.
Oh, my beautiful friend who's now an angel taught me that. And she used to say, moving at the speed of grace. And it was kind of strange that she died so young, she only 52. And one of the things that like grace, think of it. You know, when I was knighted, I couldn't believe it. I'm actually a dame of grace. I was like, whoa. That was my first title that I got in there. And so grace is like that place, that beingness within you that understands mistakes, that understands life, that understands failure, loss, being part of it. And then you begin to transform into like, okay, there's going to be a reason this occurred. And so when you what the faster that you move into the speed of grace, the faster that you will now begin to understand life and understand all the things that come at you personally that are happening in the world. Otherwise, you'll lose your mind. You will. This is when we become
Yep.
intoxicated with alcohol, with drugs, with overwork, with because we can't handle life. So pretending at first that you're moving at the speed of grace allows you to begin to integrate it and then after a while you become that.
Yeah. One of the things that I think I've heard you speak on before that moved me was the distinction between a mistake and failure and how you help people define that to be able to move on. Give me more on that, please.
Well, again, you know, we're students of Buckminster Fuller, and now, you know, we're all human experiments. And once you apply a principle into your life, you have earned the right to now speak about it from your experience.
Mm.
So it is learning experiences as opposed to mistakes. Once you transform that and you go, wow, I'm having a really big learning day, a big learning experience. I'm about to lose my mind with this learning experience that I'm having right now. And you just kind of like, then all of a sudden, your brain kind of shifts. See, the job, Brad, for all of us humans, because we're all equal, is for us to manage the hungry dog, the constant voice that I don't know about you, but mine, it can be so loud, that voice, it just kind of like picks up speed. The worse the learning experience, the more like, oh. And so the process is to just breathe. You
Yeah.
take 3 deep breaths and just, and you kind of like reset yourself. Physically, you can reset yourself.
Yeah.
And it becomes a learning experience.
I know when we were in Hawaii together a couple of years back, one of the things I meditated on afterwards was something you said about patterns, because I know for me, I've had learning experiences and sometimes, I don't know why, I just do them again. And then I seem to do that same learning experience again. And you were discussing the whole thing about patterns and changing that. Can you give our listeners a bit more on that? Because I think your perspective is amazing on that stuff.
Well, I learned again from masters. And when I was very young, I was in the legal system. And I was a very successful court reporter, but very unhappy. Then my enlightenment experience and the incidents I told you about earlier got me to a new place. And what what ended up happening when I was an official court reporter and I was going to grow up to be an attorney, no problem with money, no problem. You earn a living, you provide a service, no problem. When I had when I decided to commit my life to the betterment of humanity through entrepreneurial education,
Mm-hmm.
all of these weird thoughts came up. Deservability. Remember that word, deservability.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden it was like, who in the heck do you think you are? You're going to change the world. You're going to solve world hunger. You're going to be a model. It was like part of me was like, oh. And so what I had to do this clearing. And I want to make sure that we give everyone the gift of on Fridays with Doria, under resources, there's these magical exercises. And you did them in Creating Wealth way back in the day.
Way
And
back. Yeah.
way back. And those are when you begin to really look at your family patterns, when you begin to see what was said to you and your environment, your family, school, religious institution, when you started working, your bosses, the people, your teams, then you begin to set these patterns around all the different areas of your life. And of course, the one that is probably the most insidious is around money, because there's no neutrality on planet Earth. Very few people have neutrality around money. So then what happens is that they really show up in 3 major areas. And, it has to do with money. It has to do with sex. And it has to do in many ways in relationships.
Mm.
And so believe it or not, those are the things that run so many human beings because and I'm going to say something funny. An Australian says this to me, one of my best friends. And you probably remember Daniel, my sweetie from the 80s,
Yes.
one of my best friends. He always says, Dee, we're just monkeys. We just came off the trees. Intuitively, we are still we're being driven. There is a part of our brain that is still lives in survival.
Mm.
And so the patterns kick in. But the biggest one, if I may support your audience, is because you've handled it, and thank God I've handled it, is deservability.
Mm.
What is the level of wealth? What is the level of money that you're going to break that family, ceiling, that glass ceiling that your family gave you and the environment gave you, and work on creating new patterns of success, of financial success, of family success, of making an impact in the world. So it's almost our job on a daily basis, self-mastery of working on breaking those patterns and creating new ones. Constantly recreate yourself.
Yeah. You're on the Big Success Podcast. Dame DC Cordova. We're going to be back in a minute. We're going to talk about creating a movement and how she's been amazing at that level of success.
Serious income success for you will come through Brad Sugar's Scalability event, massive business growth, and understanding how you turn your business into a commercial, profitable enterprise that works for you so that you don't have to. Visit bradsugars.com to attend this program as a standalone or as part of Brad Sugar's Entrepreneurial University.
You're back, Big Success Podcast. Dame DC Cordova. Now, DC, when we first met, I joined what I would say is a movement. You built an amazing team over the years. Tell me more about how you bring people together like that and create that.
Well, as you can see, actually behind me, you see the fruit bowl.
Yeah.
Okay. And in our Money and You program, it comes from a thing called the Berkeley Business School, which ended up being the Accelerated Business School for entrepreneurs. We have a very strong purpose.
Mm.
My purpose is to uplift humanity's consciousness through socially responsible business. By the way, the socially responsible part didn't come up until about 15 or 20 years ago, and I've been doing this for 44 years. So when you have this, when you have a purpose that is that strong, and then you have a mission or two or three. So one of my missions is to, transform educational systems around the world and eradicate poverty and hunger. Now, if I may speak about you for 1 minute, you are, if I may say, a precessional effect. You are a beautiful ripple effect of our work, because within the environment of the entrepreneurial programs that we created, that Marshall Thurber, Bobby DePorter created, and I inherited this work and continue with building organizations. You came into a system, you learn these tools, you learn these patterns, you learn about self-mastery, and then you discover within yourself these gifts that you had, and then you went on and created, action, international action coaching, and you created this whole thing that we can't take credit for. What we can take credit is for creating an environment. So our job in creating a movement is creating an environment where people discover within themselves that which is their inherent gifts, their God-given gifts, if I may say. So that's what occurs. And then you have to have very clear rules of the game, policies, and all this is start in Money and You. And you also have to follow a thing called the business success model. And if people go to moneyandyou.com, they will find the little book that I wrote many years ago on it. It's a gift to everyone. And in what basically, to create a movement, you learn from experts, you learn from masters, you create a niche. And that's for the marketers. You have to have a niche. What makes you different than others? You leverage that niche. How do you leverage that niche? You do it through systems. You do it through an aligned team. And then naturally, the kind of like the forces, may the force be with you. The forces conspire with you to create synergy. But it's a model, it's a business model, it's a tool, it's a system. And then, of course, you create results. And in life, Marsha Martin, one of my great friends and teachers, taught me long ago, and she learned this from Werner Erhard, the creator of VAST and landmark education. She used to always say, in life, you either have reasons why you didn't create what you wanted to create, or you have the results that speak for themselves. So there has been a lot of the graduates, including, Tony Robbins, and who was right down the hill from here where we are on Maui. Tony Robbins, who many of us know about, Robert Kiyosaki, my business partner for 9 years, and he was my partner. I chose him, and we were the platform that the first book, Rich Dad, came from.
Yeah.
Also, he discovered these aspects of himself that he was able to kind of translate in a way that people really took it in. So the movement becomes that you create the environment, whether you have a product, a service, or a program, now platforms. And then, because remember, in the old days, only religious organizations, politicians had platforms. Now anyone can have a platform. You have a platform, I have a platform. And so now that creates, you churn out, that's a very good word, churn out social entrepreneurs and people that will then change the world. And thank you, Brad, and all your team. Thank you, Bruce Campbell, another major Money and You graduate who makes everybody do Money and You, because they learned the basics there. And then you can then, as humans, we need to be molded, because if we don't mold ourselves, we don't create a team, we don't create a mastermind, an organization to be able to work to support us, then the world molds you in a way that may not be intentional, may not be in the way that you want it to be. So when you mold yourself in an environment where you get to choose how you want to be, then you begin to create a movement of movements, a movement of movements. So it's the ultimate leverage. You, my friend, are, and please take this in the nicest, most loving way, you are my leverage.
Yeah.
You're much younger than me. I'm going to live to be 130. You're going to live to be 180. Okay. So you and all the people that you inspire are my leverage for my purpose, my missions, and then you begin to change the world.
Yeah.
So
I still love it. On every webinar I ever do, I have two original mentors on there. I put a photo of me and you and a photo of me and Paul Dunn. So I 100% am happy to say I am your leverage. With that being said, you say it just rolls off your tongue, social entrepreneurship. You've been doing it since before it was trendy, cool, whatever the terminology is. What led you to want to shift humanity rather than just make a dollar? What led you to that? And then how can other people shift themselves to see it as see business as more than just making money?
personally, it was the level of loss that I had. I have quite a background, very young, losing my beloved, miscarriaging babies, losing friends, tough time. Vietnam War, drugs coming online, just it was the 70s were tough.
Mm.
And so that the pain and not having the tools to manage that, and instead you did other things, and when I had the enlightenment experience, it allowed for me to begin to, like, okay, I really need to shift. And because I was in the legal system, I was surrounded by cases with attorneys, and there were a lot of civil cases that I watched. And then I began to see, and also I was a court reporter in family law. Oh my God, I could only do that for 3 months. I used to go home and cry all day long, on every night. It was so horrific. And so what happened was that I began to see the world. Then Buckminster Fuller came along, and he spoke about that scarcity. The Malthusian theory of economics was no longer a reality on planet Earth in the early 70s.
Mm.
And all governments and financial institutions are based on that. So all of a sudden, he was giving us a new model of education, a new model of financial gain, a new model of creating businesses. And Marshall Thurber and Bobby DePorter tested that in their real estate company in the 70s in San Francisco by transforming all those beautiful Victorians, now that you are worth $20 million, they were being torn down. And so now you begin to combine human potential movement principles with solid business principles, with the how do you really run a business? That has never changed. You create a good product or service, you make it enough so that you can have some profit. But then there's many religious institutions that also teach about tithing. So it's not like a new idea, but what we began being experiments, and then people began to apply these principles, and we began to prove and to create a whole alternative educational system That's what we have done. That's what you have done.
Mm.
That's what I have done. That's what, the Tony Robbins and, Robert Kiyosaki's and Sharon Lecter, and even more, Ben Cohen
Yeah.
of Ben and Jerry's did Money and You in 1979. He created a movement. Paul Mitchell, he did Money and You in 1980. He passed away in 1989, but he created also movements. So now you're showing people that you can create wealth and do good, and that's what social enterprise is. And you begin to, as you age and you begin to move more into your legacy, you now begin to shift your energy. And we all are going to age, and it goes by really quick, you guys. Look at, I remember when Brad had no gray hair, but he looks great. But I remember we had no gray hair. Doesn't it go fast, Brad? It goes fast, right?
Especially when you have, like, I have so many kids, it's like I feel like it goes faster every day. But
So now you have, all of a sudden, when the workplace becomes a place of transformation, of personal fulfillment, where you begin to transform yourself and you transform the workplace. And Edwards Deming, one of our major influences of Money and You and the business school, when Edwards Deming teaches us that systems are key to creating a workplace of joy, of, and he's the number one productivity genius still on the planet. So when the masters prove scientifically that the workplace is key in creating peace on the planet, now you move fast forward 40, 50 years later from when the human potential movement came into the planet, and we have become the proof. We're it. And that's why we have to support each other. We love your platforms. We support each other so that the bigger movement hits the wider world.
You're on the Big Success Podcast. We're going to be back in a minute, and I'm going to ask Doria about scaling up, the difference between good and amazing.
Dame Doria Cordova is the CEO, owner of Excellerated Business Schools, Money and You, the organization that brought to the world entrepreneurial, experiential, transformational training programs with over 200,000 graduates from over 85 countries. To learn more about Dame Doria Cordova, please visit dccordova.com.
Big Success. DC, scale. You've taught so many people, and some of them have gone on to do like billionaire status. Some of them have just gone on to do normal. And neither one is better than the other, but there's a difference in the thinking. What do you notice is the difference in the thinking between those who go to that billionaire status and do amazing things around the world?
Well, number one, for sure, is drive. There's a great new book with Arnold Schwarzenegger, where he's just talking, go to work. I was watching him being interviewed, and I go, oh my God, I was raised by a German raised grandmother, and I have that in me. It's like, you're going to do something. Okay. So that is the typical drive. But I mentioned it before. It has to do with deservability, but also it has, one of my best books ever is Good to Great.
Yeah.
You know how much we love that book, Jim Collins. The big, audacious, hairy goal, right? You have to be outrageous. At 27 years old, I said, I'm part of the Hunger Project. If I do it all by myself, I'm going to eradicate hunger on the planet. Now, just so you know, sometimes it doesn't look like you have reached that big goal, but precessionally, the 90-degree effect, the ripple effects, the physics of the ripple effects, precession, you will see that we have transformed the world tremendously. So you have to make this a huge, hairy goal. So my beloved just finished reading the latest Elon Musk book. And it's very interesting because there are so many feelings that we all have about Elon Musk. But what was so interesting is that, well, number one, in Australia, they have a beautiful word, which it sounds weird in America, but not in Australia, which is a freak. A freak is actually something unusual. It's actually a compliment. If somebody calls you a freak, it's like, man, you are like different. You're like nobody else. So then there is the freak factor. when you have these people that are so outrageous. And so they go on a list of, I think there's 3,000 plus billionaires on the planet alone. Now, when you look at the rest of the world, this is kind of funny. It's a funny topic because it's great for you to say that you want to be a billionaire, but just take a look and see how many billionaires there really is in the world out of 8 billion people. So how about if we make it a little bit more palatable and set an audacious goal? Number one, first, financial independence. What does that mean to you? And we're talking, now we move into the Chinese world. There's a word I love. You know, we've been doing programs for the Chinese for decades now, 24 years. And so net, everybody say net. Okay. So what is the net that after the US government or your government has been paid off, the excess have been paid off, everything is paid off, it's yours, net. What is that?
Yeah.
Is that 100 million? Is that 25 million? Is that a billion? Net. So now you have a figure that you work towards your net in your pocket, free of everything. You don't have to share that with anyone, not even your spouse if you don't want. The spouse has their 100 million, you have your 100 million. So now you get very, very clear on that. And then it's like, what is the impact that you want to make? What is that one thing? You have got to pick a world problem. The most successful people that I know, and I know many billionaires, have chosen a problem to solve. They have created an economic engine around that. For some of you, it's creating an economic engine around your life purpose. And they created an economic engine using the business success model that I spoke about earlier. And then now that money machine creates tremendous wealth. But what happens with most people, gosh, it's so hard for me to watch, is that they want to be right. Like their beliefs, what they were trained, like if they do the opposite of what their beautiful middle class mother or father or brother or sister is doing, that is going to become a challenge. And they almost are being held back by these beliefs. They haven't broken through. And this is not just, this is why we love Money and You, because in Money and You, you get to like really kind of break away. And I always love to hear, what you got out of the program, but it's like we break away from those shackles of beliefs and of agreement. You have to understand that we're run by generalized principles, whether you believe in them or not. I am so sorry to give you the bad news. Gravity is a generalized principle. Leverage is a generalized principle. Precision is a generalized principle. There's many more. So when you don't understand leverage to leverage your resources. I have this great little book called Access to Cash, $9, $10 in Amazon. AccessToCashBook.com. You can go and find the direct link there. Access is key. Leverage and access. So right now, all of you, right now, you're much wealthier. I am much wealthier. So is Brad. From being together for this short, beautiful program together, and all the other ones that Brad brings to you, all the ones I bring to you, Fridays with Doria, all my platform. Now what we have is we have access, we have leverage, and that's the difference between people that do well, do great, do fantastic, and are game changers. But you can be a game changer in your own environment. You don't have to be rich and famous, but choose to be a game changer in your own pond, in your own area. But choose that right this moment, and that will change the world.
Doria, one last question. What is your favorite quote, or what's the most important thing you were ever taught around the subject of success?
The only failure is the failure to participate.
I knew it was going to be that. I wrote that down. I said, I knew it's going to be that. I love that you taught that to me back when I was 20 years of age. Well, Blair Singer, through you, taught it to me back when I was 20 years of age. So I want to thank you for today and thank you for everything you've added value to me in my life. Gang, this is the Big Success Podcast. Click the show notes, go follow Doria, learn as much as you can, attend Money and You, do what you need to do to get the lessons. We'll be back with more success for you next week. And that's the Big Success Podcast for today. Hopefully you took a lot of notes and hopefully you learned a bunch and hopefully you're going to take action on it and refer people. Remember, if you haven't subscribed, click that subscribe button now. Be with us every week on the Big Success Podcast. BS, Brad Sugar's Big Success. Take action. Check the show notes for all the links. I'll give you all the links for everything that your speaker had. Make sure you follow through and keep the learning going. Remember, you got to grow into your goals. I'll speak to you next time on the Big Success Podcast.
You've been listening to the Big Success Podcast with the #1 business coach in the world, Brad Sugars. To learn more about how to achieve business and personal success, as well as how to level up or listen to past episodes, visit www.bradsugars.com.